Well, good day, everybody. I hope everybody's Friday is going well, and welcome to the final deep dive of 24. We have had a phenomenal list of guest hosts. I actually see Bridget Cutchin, who was our guest host last month, is on with us today, and we are thrilled to have Samantha Evans of Anmed Health with us this month. I always joke around with Sam that she uses all 12 inches of a foot. So if if there was somebody that works harder out there, I do not know of them. If James Brown was the hardest working man in show business, Samantha Evans is the hardest worker in revenue cycle. So we are very thrilled to have Sam with us. Just a quick bio on Sam. She serves as Director of Revenue Cycle for Hospital Services at Anmed Health. That is over in Anderson, South Carolina. She is over patient access, PFS, revenue integrity, and the Q&A training team. She is a local. She has a BBA from Anderson University. There's local that is located right there in Anderson, South Carolina, and is currently pursuing her MHA from, is it Duke, Sam? I was trying to get a smile.
Absolutely not.
She is at the North Carolina Chapel Hill. So she will tell everybody go Tar Heels. She loves that baby blue. In addition to her roles there at Anmed, she also is an adjunct professor at Anderson University, teaching business statistics and business financial management. So, like I said, she does not sit still for anybody. And we're so lucky because Sam is a phenomenal leader. I think most of you on this as guests already know Sam, and they know what a phenomenal leader, what a phenomenal person she is. So I'm so excited today that we kind of get to talk about the critical role of leadership and how it shapes a thriving revenue cycle culture. So kind of just let's dive straight into it. One of the things that I heard a long time ago was about the three tenets of leadership. Those three tenets being the mission, the people, and then the cultures. Those are the three things that you really can control. So in thinking about those three things, what does leadership, like, what is leadership to you? And then we can let's get even more granular after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I were to summarize like leadership into one word, it's influence. I think leadership is about influencing those around you towards a common goal, a common mission, a common vision. I'm taking a leadership class in the spring, but was on campus, and we kicked off our. I have a leadership class coming up in the spring, and we kicked it off a couple days ago, and that was their very first question. Let's talk about the difference in being a leader and being a manager. And so the first question was, what is a leader? And that's the first thing that came to mind, was just the ability to influence those around you in a positive way. And I think you do that, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, through gaining their trust. But really, I guess to kind of put a bow on it, I would say leading is having the ability to influence those around you.
So let's talk about in your leadership style and influence, right? So that was one thing that you just said. How do you believe you become a leader worth following?
Yeah, I mean, I think first you build trust with the people around you so that they trust you enough to follow you. I part of the leadership class for the spring, we had to watch a YouTube video, and I think it was Colin Powell. It was like 2 minutes. And he said that his sergeant had told him that's exactly what leadership. He said, you're a good leader when people will follow you, even if it's just out of curiosity. And so I think before anybody is willing to follow you, you have to show them that, one, you're worth following, and what direction are you going in. And so I think you do that by building trust. I don't think you're going to follow anybody who you don't trust, but I think trust is at the core, and you gain trust a lot of different ways. And again, I'm sure we'll get there, but I think it's making sure that what you're influencing not only matches like who you are as a person, but as an organization too. I think it's important that you're making sure that you're influencing folks, empowering them, motivating them to a goal that not only is yours personally or as a group, but kind of as an organization. And so, leadership is all about, hey, it's dark. I don't know which way's the best path, but let's try this one. And I think once you build trust, the folks around you are like, hey, let's roll.
So, and I appreciate that you said that from an organizational structure, right? So, when you're looking at the mission of revenue cycle in the mission inside of Anmed Health, more specific, um, how do you think that you impart the mission of a healthcare facility and relate that to revenue cycle in getting your team to buy into the mission of what you're trying to accomplish there for that community?
Yeah, Amnet's been on like a culture journey, and part of that culture journey has been updating our mission, vision, values. So, our mission in what used to be a paragraph, we kind of said, hey, let's summarize it as high level as we can, but it's to the point. And so, Amnet's mission is to provide exceptional and compassionate care to all we serve. And that looks different in every area of Anmed, but it's connecting the rev cycle to their purpose. And so when we say provide exceptional and compassionate care, care doesn't have to be clinical care. And so we can help live out the mission of Anmed by ensuring the care that we're providing in the rev cycle is exceptional and is compassionate. And so Anmed created like a three-prong approach. It's called our human experience model. And it's creating a better connection, better care, better conclusion. That's not just in the clinical areas. And so I'll take, for example, usually the first touch of a patient, a lot of time is with our centralized scheduling team. They're starting the hospital service off by scheduling it. Well, First Call has the ability to create a better connection, better care, and better conclusion within their own individual encounter. And so better care can look very different. It can be, making sure the patient understands what you're doing for them, making sure you're managing up the next department, whether that's authorizations, financial clearance. So it's all about understanding when a mission says providing exceptional care, what does my role look like in providing that care? And care then takes on a much bigger meaning. So I think before anybody can like buy into a mission or a vision of an organization, they have to understand the part that they play. And I think we do that really well here. We make sure that we're connecting everybody to their purpose. What role do you play in making sure that our patients are getting exceptional care? And I think it's much easier to buy in towards a mission when you know the role that you play.
So, two things that you said on that is as far as the mission of Anmed is you mentioned the words care and connection. I can tell you from my leadership style, those are two big things that I harp on, right? Is that when you are a leader or you're in a manager or supervisor role, I think most kids grow up and they go, "Oh, I just want to be in charge," and then everybody will say they'll do what I tell them to do. And it's one thing that I had a conversation with my daughter at one point, and I said, when you're in charge, that doesn't mean you tell everybody what to do. It means you're responsible for those that are in your charge. One thing that Elizabeth and I have really challenged ourselves on in starting Altum is debunking the fallacy that you have to be hard nosed, you have to be rude or discourteous to your employees to really achieve something great. One thing that we've tried to really do is look at the person as an individual first and an employee second. How are we feeding into them personally? How are we developing their skills? How are we developing them as a leader so they are the next person up? And then how are we connecting with them in what they're going through in life and what they bring to Altum? So I kind of wanted you to just kind of hit on from the care and connection standpoint, how do you think your your leadership style connects and you show your care and your compassion for your team, establishing that trust and also establishing them buying into the mission that you're wanting for the revenue cycle team.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect, when I started off talking about the difference in leadership and management, like you basically just hit on it, right? Management is over here managing the processes, managing the deadlines. Sitting in my role, I have management duties. I have, KPIs we have to hit. We have to hit certain deadlines. I have to manage the certain processes. To me, that's management. That's not leadership. And there's a big difference in the two. And so I think you make a good point, that the management of being over people and making sure certain deadlines are hit, that you can't put that to the wayside and only focus on leadership. Leadership more or less focuses on how do you do that? How do you get people on the same page where we're hitting the deadlines, where we're doing, very high standard of work? I think you said it a little bit, but it's making sure that the people that you lead understand that you love them as a person first and not like what they can do for you. And I think we miss the mark on that a lot. I think we get so focused on the people that we lead, like, how can you help me reach this goal? How can you help me make this revenue cycle as successful as possible? What can you do for me? That's not leadership. Leadership is, what can I do for you? How
exactly.
Can I better support you? My goal every single morning, and my team knows that, is how can I support you today? And sometimes that means that the managerial tasks that I just mentioned, they get put on the back burner and I have to find a time to do those later. But leadership is about serving first. And I hope my team always feels like me serving them is the biggest part of my day. And I'm never pushing them for an outcome because I care what they can do for me or the success that they can help this organization reach. It's, I care about them because I want to push them to their highest potential. And it just reminds me of my dad growing up in sports. He pushed me very hard. And he always ingrained in me, like, I love you, so I want you to be the best you can be. That's leadership. I push my folks to be the best they can be because I love them and I want them to see their full potential. And so that's what I hope that they see, not that ever, we have to do this by this at this standard. All of that comes. So all of what I just said comes. We meet deadlines. We meet high standards. That comes when you show that you care about them as a person before you care what they can do for you. And so it doesn't have to be one or the other, but I think when you put leadership before management, the managerial duties come.
So you hit on something that is very, very important to us as leaders, and I'm speaking about Elizabeth and I. We actually have consistent meetings where we're going to our managers and saying, what do you need from us? What do you need from us to do your job to the best of its ability? That servant leadership where you almost have, as I've heard it called, a flipped funnel, where rather than you worried about everybody pouring into what makes you look good, you've flipped that and you're using your leadership to give back to everybody else around you. So this is one thing that I want to hit on before we move to the team. All right. So as long as I've known you, you are probably one of the biggest evangelists about revenue cycle. You just get excited about revenue cycle. You're excited about what it does and how important it is to the mission of a hospital. You realize the role of revenue in keeping hospitals in communities and serving communities. So how do you impart that to your team members? How do you get them engaged and excited about revenue cycle?
Yeah, I think you foster a culture of psychological safety. That's kind of a new phrase that's coming out in the last couple years. It's, are you fostering a culture where your staff and your managers feel safe coming to you to say, hey, I tried this and it didn't work? Or I know we set this goal, we didn't hit it, and here's why. I think we have fostered a managers group where we all are so bought in to a very high standard that we know we're not going to get it right sometimes, and we have to be okay with that. If all you're focusing on is the end results and the KPIs, then you can say that you're fostering a culture of the ability to fail or the safety to come and say, hey, that didn't work. But if all you care about is hitting all these KPIs, like, your word doesn't mean anything. Because I can say that, like, yeah, this is a safe fail zone, this is a safe, environment, throw ideas, and if it doesn't work, we'll go to the next one. But if the only time I'm celebrating success is when we hit these, then my word doesn't match my actions. And so I think it's celebrating behaviors along the way. It's not just about results. It's about how are we going about trying to get the results. And if you celebrate sometimes the how and the who and not always the what, I think we all continue to get motivated and inspired to be the best that we can be. But I think it's celebrating behaviors and not just results. And I think that's how we grow. I think Anmed's also really trying to focus like a culture of feedback. We're trying to get everybody used to, y'all, like, feedback. I think we have the word like feedback such of connotation that everybody's scared of feedback. It's, if you're giving me any feedback, it's because you think I didn't do something right. Or if you're giving me feedback, I messed up. No, feedback is about loving somebody so much that you want them to get to their best potential. And they get there by you being willing to say, hey, I feel you could be even more effective if you were to do this. And so there's two sides of that. We have to be open to feedback, and then we also have to be comfortable with giving feedback. And I think when you get to wanting to be the best, then you welcome feedback. I know that I have managers that they are constantly reaching out saying, hey, how could I have done that better? How could I have said that better, handled that better, went about this better? When you get to a point where you have a culture where everybody is like craving feedback because you all want to grow and you want to be the best, like, that's a really good place to be. But you have to get over that hurdle of feedback is negative. It's not. And we're just more or less getting used to the norm of giving that feedback. And I think that's just when you grow. It's when your team is engaged. And it's when you end up having leaders that are just bought into the success of the rev cycle.
So, and because I see we do have some, some leaders on here, what do you think that you did in allowing that culture of feedback to, because we've all run into employees before where there's a high level of defensiveness. They almost feel like that you're criticizing them rather than critiquing. So what do you think that you have done or that your team has done there at Anmed to foster that where feedback is freely given and freely received?
We have partnered it with appreciation. And so, people call this method a couple different things. I've heard like the sandwich method where you sandwich something good, feedback, and then another positive. That's not really the method, but it's a very similar approach. We pair it with, hey, Matt, what I really appreciate about you is, and I feel you could be even more effective if. And the and there is important because I think a lot of times as leaders, we're like, hey, man, we really appreciate how hard you did this, this, and this, but you need to do this. When you use the word but, like, you're basically everything that you just said, like, totally goes by the wayside. So the word and there has been in a very important piece of, hey, I appreciate you, and I feel you could be even more effective if. The even more effective is important there as well, because you're already letting the person know, like, I already think you're effective. Like, this isn't saying you're somehow ineffective. obviously it's very well known, like the tone in which we give it, the body language in which we give it, all of that's important as well. But it's, something that's worked well is we've kind of partnered it with an appreciation. The last thing I'll mention is it's also being humbled as leaders to know that sometimes what we're having to address, we had a part in. So I'll just say if we're having to have a conversation on productivity, as leaders, we have to take a step back to say, did we set this person up to succeed? Did we get them the training that they need? Did we follow up with them like we should have? And so a lot of times the feedback, you're not only giving it to the employee, but you're humbling yourself in front of them to say, hey, I also want you to be able to tell me, like, what can I do to help you succeed? What could I have done differently to not get us here? And so I think it becomes more of a joint conversation of, hey, you're not where we need you to be. We feel you could be even more effective if, but also turn it around as your leader. How can I help you get to where you need to be? And what could I have done differently? And how can I support you better moving?
Yeah, and that's, I guess I love the direction of that. And that actually goes into a question which you've already somewhat already answered is, how do you pick from your teammates in your team those that you see as the next level of leaders? And then how do you foster that environment to get them to step into the potential that you see out of it to be the next person up or to be your next replacement? I kind of wanted to see what you thought of as far as, what factors do you see inside of employees to go, hey, that person is going to make a phenomenal leader. Let's try to elevate them. Let's try to make sure that they are seeing their potential and living up to it.
We've gone a more like formative approach at Anmed, and we've actually kind of engaged in succession planning. So it's been very intentional here. It's been me having a conversation with every one of my leaders to say, hey, are you content in your role now? Where do you see yourself 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to grow? And how can I help support that growth? So I think step number one is to get, like, not every good leader and not every good manager like wants the next step. And so I could see all the potential in the world. If that's not where they want to go, it's not that I don't continue to pour into them and help them grow in their current role, but I think it's important that you know exactly who kind of wants to go where so that you can strategically and intentionally structure the growth in which you're, working with them on. So I would say intentionality in having conversations on both sides, them being willing to come to you to say, hey, I really want to grow. I would love to sit in your seat in the next 3 to 5 years. How can I do that? The second part, and something that again is kind of taken some humility, I think sometimes as leaders, if we have had any type of success in any parts of our leadership journey, we somehow convince ourselves that like our leadership style and how we go about things are the best way. And so I have to sometimes take a step back to say, am I only looking at qualities that match mine? And if that's the case, then I'm going to miss out on a lot of good people. And so sometimes great leadership qualities look like qualities that I don't have. And so I always make sure that I'm looking for potential that doesn't just match what I see in myself. And so that could be, I'm naturally an extrovert. I'll talk to anybody and I love things like this. You can be a good leader and you can be more on like the low energy positive spectrum. So you could be a great leader because you listen really well. I need to listen better. I speak more than I listen. That's something I'm taking away. So I want to make sure, like, when I'm looking for potential, it's not, okay, who has Samantha qualities? It's who has leadership qualities. And so I want to make sure that I'm never overlooking someone just because they don't act like me or lead like me or have my personality. And so I've really started to make sure that qualities are inclusive of what everybody brings to the team. So kind of to summarize that, I think it's having intentional conversations, knowing exactly where every single person that you lead sits in their current role, where they themselves like in the next 3 to 5 years, and how can you as their leader help them get there.
So, it just popped up a second ago, and I think it transitions well into talking about building culture. Bill Icos had sent over something that you had shared with him before, and it said in the constant grind of what's next will always lead to burnout because you never feel like you accomplished anything, and you're always striving for more. And the constant striving is always going to, eventually catch up with you, but that you encourage to say, take time to water your flowers, celebrate the wins, and regroup, and then move on to the next. So, how does one celebrate wins or define wins in revenue cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Bill did a fantastic job at South Carolina HFMA. He did a session on burnout. And so I had given him a couple tips as to how do I try to not get burned out. And the story about watering your flowers was, sometimes we're so much of here's the flowers. Okay, well they're gonna die in a couple days. Like that was great. Let me go to the next. Like take a couple days to like enjoy your flowers and smell them before you move on to a different flower. I think that's really hard for type A people that always are striving for something bigger. But I think it's celebrate the wins along the way. And sometimes that doesn't always mean from a financial or a numerical number. Sometimes I think, we set all these goals, we're on calendar year. So a lot of our manager meetings have been about, hey, with 2 weeks left, what are our 24 goals? Where are we sitting on our 24 goals? Well, a lot of things that we hit, like, did we celebrate enough along the way in 2024? Or are we so set on, here are my year goals, I know where I stand, but I only win if I get that end result? Like, that's not the case. Like, there are tons of little wins throughout the year, but are we taking the time to celebrate those? And are we taking the time to say, hey, we're not there yet, but we're also not where we were. So let's just take a little time to celebrate that before we move on. And that takes intentionality. I've used that word a lot, y'all, but being intentional in so many aspects of leadership is so important, because if you're not intentional about celebrating the little wins, then all you will focus on is what's the end goal. And I only care about reaching that, and I don't care what happens in between. And so it kind of goes back to when I mentioned, like, celebrate the behaviors. Maybe we're not there yet, but you've seen a lot of growth in an employee. Celebrate that. Celebrate that you've seen them, refocus, go about their job a different way. But it's just about being intentional to try to find those little wins and not just always celebrate, did we win big at the end of the year?
So one of the things that Elizabeth pushed on me, and it was a term that I didn't know until she and I started working together, was redefine the win. Especially in sales, we always look at the win as signing a contract. We don't consider anything else as a win unless we get some type of contract out of it. And one of the things that she used to really challenge me on is, did you have positive conversation? Are you moving towards a goal? What was the win at attending, let's say, an HFMA conference? And like you said, celebrating the little wins, but also redefining what those wins are. So instead of looking, like you said, as a financial or numerical or revenue based goal, it is, where did we grow? Where did we develop? Where are we better today than we were yesterday? And accepting those as new wins, or redefining those wins as moving and making positive progress towards the goal, rather than feeling like, oh, well, we just have to skip to the end result or everything has been wasted. One thing that Hudson Shelton, unfortunately, the Tennessee fan of the group, brought up here, is he talked about your love of teaching, and how much you love imparting your knowledge and your wisdom, not only to your team but also to the students that you have. And he was saying, with talking about wins and successes and how much you have a joy in revenue cycle, what are you seeing in imparting those wins and that knowledge into your kids, and where do you get joy and satisfaction out of doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so crazy how closely tied like leadership and teaching is, and I think that's why I love teaching so much. Of course, I'm teaching them a subject, but I'm also helping lead them and kind of mold them and teach them more than just, hey, here's what a balance sheet and an income statement is. I have loved being able to bring in the revenue cycle in my, chapters that I'm teaching. And it allows me to kind of show them the importance of a revenue cycle in a hospital system. Because I would go ahead and guess that about maybe 98% of college kids don't know what revenue cycle is. Heck, that may be 99. And I could probably say that every single one of us, when we were in college, we probably had never heard about revenue cycle. And so I feel like revenue cycle is kind of a career that you more or less fall into. Maybe you started in one area of the hospital and you kind of fell into rev cycle and you either fall in love with it and make it a career, or you move away from it. I love having the ability to influence, okay, back to that influence 18, 19, and 20-year-olds that like the revenue cycle has a place in healthcare, and it is a big place in healthcare. And so, of course, when you have career days in 10th grade and 11th grade, the nursing always gets a big, like, hey, come be a nurse, come be a doctor, come be a tech, right? There's all of these things. Revenue cycle just doesn't get any kind of pub or and so I love having the ability to introduce here's what revenue cycle is. And it plays a pretty big part, not only like in the patient journey, but in a hospital journey as well. And so I've really appreciated the opportunity to not only teach something that I love, I'm a math geek and love finance, but also introduce that revenue cycle can be a pretty cool career. And it doesn't always have to be the nursing and the therapy and the physician of the world.
So in talking about it being a career and in those that have longevity in there, how do you think you sustain a great culture once you've been able to establish it?
I'm going to use my word intentional again. You can't just build a culture and expect it to like just stay. I'll use my golf game for example. It's struggling right now, unfortunately. Um, I put a lot of time and effort into trying to break 80, and I haven't broken 80 yet, but I got down to like 84. So there for about 2, 3, 4 months, I was consistently shooting in the low to mid 80s. All right. I can't sustain those scores if I don't continue to put in the work. Like, that's not how that works. You don't just get to a point like, okay, I'm playing pretty decent golf, and then you just don't put any work into it and then still expect to show up and shoot at 84. I'd be like lucky to break 100 right now, but it's my own fault, right? I've trained for a marathon. I had school. I haven't been able to put the work in. So, like, I can't expect to still be as good as I was 6 months ago when I was going to the range every single night. Culture, everything, like, that's the same. You can't like work really hard to build anything and then just be like, all right, on autopilot now, we're good to go. It's continuing to be intentional about re-bringing up, hey, what does accountability mean to us? What does appreciation mean to us? What does integrity mean to us? It's staying consistent and making sure that the culture that we're trying to foster here always stays top of mind. And so that's how you sustain something. You continue to water it, however you want to put it. It just doesn't go on autopilot. You still have to be very intentional to once you build something to ensure that you can sustain.
So, talking about intentionality, and that is a word that I use a lot. Um, I worked for a bank several years ago. It was one of the first jobs I had out of college, and the president of the bank had the first office. As soon as you walked in, it was all glass around, so everybody knew where he was. And I remember seeing him come back from lunch one day, and I saw him in the parking lot, and he's wearing full suit and tie, and I saw him out there picking up trash out of the parking lot. And I remember, I mean, that stuck with me. I mean, this is 25 years later, and it still stuck with me that he looked at it as I'm leading by example. Nothing is beneath me. My job as janitor is just as important as anybody else. Um, so, how do you think leading by example fosters a great culture?
Man, it's everything. I went to listen to my brother preach a couple Sundays ago. He's a pastor in Greenwood. And kind of his ending statement to us was, if you couldn't tell people that you were a Christ follower, would they be able to tell? And I was like, ooh. So he was like, if you post certain religious things on your, social media, if you could no longer do that, if nobody had access to anything other than your actions, would they be able to see that you follow Christ? And so I kind of bring that same mindset into leadership. If I could never write another Monday motivation email to my team on Monday morning, if I could never have my bi-weekly manager meetings where we talk about the culture concept of the month, if I could never say another word about leadership, do my actions point to being a good leader? And that's really what it comes down to. I can talk about leadership all I want. I can have the best quotes. I can have the best Monday motivation emails to my team. Like, that's all great. You can talk about being a leader, and then being a leader is actually very different. And so a lot of people talk about leadership. Not a lot of people actually lead. And so I guess I'll leave it with that actions are at the core of creating trust and influence and being a leader. And I hope that the people that I lead would say, if I never could tell them another thing about leadership, that my actions show that I love them and I focus on leading them well every single day. And so I think that's a pretty daggone good summary of how I feel like actions matter.
Well, so that actually goes perfect to my last question. Reputation is what people think about you now. Your legacy is what people are going to think about you in the future. Um, what do you want your leadership legacy to be?
That everybody I left them better off than when I started. And I just hope that everybody that I lead knows that I've always led to a high standard because I want to push them to their biggest potential. And it kind of goes back to, I always bring in sports. That's how all my coaches were, right? They always, I love you enough that I want to push you to your highest level. And so sometimes that isn't a career move. Sometimes that isn't hitting some goal. Sometimes leaving people better than where they started is on a personal level. Maybe they personally grew in some aspect. It goes back to, I'm not leading my team to be the best they can be on the premise of Anmed. I hope I lead my team to be the best people that we can be on a daily basis. And it's not about what they can give me in return. So I guess the summary, I want to leave everybody with the understanding that I love them enough where I want them to reach their highest potential. And I hope that I've helped them do that in some aspect of life, even if it's not revenue cycle.
Sam, that's awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, sharing your talents, and your leadership knowledge with us. I want to thank everybody else for joining us today. For those that have been for multiple, you know what I'm going to say. We do have these every month. I know next month will be Tyler Sanders, Director of Patient Financial Services at St. Joseph's Candler. but Sam, we appreciate you. We appreciate your knowledge and sharing that on there. Um, you have many people on here. Liz just said, you got us all tearing up. You're just such a boss queen. And thank you for being you, is what she said. And Bill saying that you're just one of the best. These are flooding in here. So we thank you again. We want to make sure everybody knows that this will be posted up on our website. If you want to share it with somebody later on, that's altumhs.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We do want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. So thank you for what you're doing. Continue to fight the good fight, and y'all have a good rest of your year. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks so much, y'all. See you later.